Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Frequency 432, The Backstory with Rocks Royalty, and I'm your host, John Canis. And today we have the inimitable San Diego music legend, Mr. Robin Henkel, with us today. How's it going, Robin?
I'm going to have to look that up. Is that good?
It's better than good.
Oh,
it's
better
the highest superlative.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
Good to see you, Robin.
Yeah.
It's great to have you, and I want to talk today about really about the blues, like the indigenous form of American music that is unlike any other across the span of the globe over the last 100+ years. And really, the blues have been around over 100 years now. And I think that, we've gone through all these different phases of civilization. Came from like a feudal system. We had kings and noblemen and serfs and peasants, which were really like slaves. And we had so much of this country that was built on slave culture. And you had all these different cultures coming from all over the world. Most of them came into the port city of New Orleans, and you had like all the African influence and Cuban, Calypso, the Native American Indians. You had field hollers, ragtime, and then I like to think of the blues as sort of like, like a sand in an oyster. And you've got that irritant that eventually produces a pearl. And to me, without all this social oppression of slavery and such, we wouldn't have had the blues. And the blues to me is like that pearl that came out of the irritant of, social inequality and all the things of all the people that were brought here, whether willing or against their will. And now we've had like 100, 125 years of this kind of culture around. It seems like you've made an entire lifetime of reveling in and celebrating the music of the blues. I mean, how did you get started with this?
Well, I listened to music when I was a little kid. Before I even heard blues, it's mostly American folk music. Folk music revival was kind of big in the early 60s, late 50s. Parents took me to coffee houses. But eventually, to make the long story short, when I was living in Seattle, they took me to see Josh White. And he knocked my socks off. And I said to my dad, of course, my mom and dad wanted to take me to this concert. And I didn't want to go because if my parents liked it, can't be any good, you know? So anyway, I went, and at the end of it, I said, man, I like every song that guy did. And my dad goes, well, that's blues, And Josh White left a really profound, he was more classy, a little more elegant than a lot of the real raw, raunchy blues players, more like Mississippi Delta style. You can really hear a difference. I think if you compared Muddy Waters and Skip James and some of Fred McDowell, Robert Johnson from the Mississippi Delta to Josh White's style, he was more smooth and got a clear voice. It's kind of, I don't know if it's a good analogy, but sometimes I call him like the Nat King Cole of blues, but it was definitely blues. Influenced also by a lot of church music. He did what was called blues and spirituals.
Would you say there's some jazz elements in there, like in the voicings at all?
And so, yeah, because he didn't strictly limit himself to the 1-4-5 12-bar blues progression.
Yeah.
He did. He would throw in 1-6-2-5 or 2-5s and other different combinations. He did One Meatball, which is a minor blues. It was a blues song in a minor key that used, I don't want to get too technical.
Oh, we can do a lot of theory here. I think when I was a teenager, I had people that were influencing me that were a bit older, and that was the one song they would always cite by Josh White as One Meatball as being like a standard of his, and the thing that kind of made him stand out, his interpretation of that song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's from what the liner notes say is that song was done originally back when they had saloon type taverns. They call them opera houses, but it was where out in the West they would have dancers and comedians and stuff, and it was done in that environment. And it may even date back earlier than that, because they said it was originally in Italian, which would have been one fishball. And who knows the exact origins of these things? People will try to find. But when I looked at the song, it's been sung by a lot of surprising people. I can't remember who. But
that's the beautiful thing about folk and blues music and things that we think of as traditional, is that there's no author to the songs because they've been passed down orally from generation to generation to generation. And you talked about that folk renaissance that happened in the 50s, I think largely because of the avant-garde filmmaker and archivist Harry Smith, when he put together for Folkways the anthology of folk music, like this 3-volume, 6 LP set that really sparked all the, like Dylan and Dave Van Ronk and Joan Baez and Phil Oakes and all the guys that were really famous in the 60s that were part of the folk movement. And that's where people were getting really more, all the boomers of that era were really getting back in touch with, pop music in the Mitch Miller sort of sense had gotten really slick before the likes of Dylan and, say, the Beatles and the Stones came along. Pop music was very slick. And a lot of people were like turning to the folk medium and the blues medium as a way of kind of like feeling like it was authentic, like it wasn't fake and plastic, And so that whole thing in the collegiate scene, so you went to college. I think you've been in San Diego most of your life, except for a brief time as a kid when you were in Seattle, and you graduated from Kearney High here.
Yes, that's correct.
Is it class of '69? Is that right?
Class of '69.
Yeah. So you've seen San Diego go through so many changes.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And I think the first big band you were in coming out of college was, were they called Jambalaya?
Jambalaya. Yeah. It was a rock band, 3-piece rock band.
Would you call them a power trio?
I don't know if they used that terminology back then. They might have. I don't remember. We call it hard rock.
Hard rock. Okay.
And it's just an overall generalized thing. But the music we did was Cream, Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, stuff like, not necessarily dance music, but when we played in the bars, we realized that dance music was good. At one point, Corky, the guitar player, handed me a Rolling Stones songbook. They must have like 30 songs in it. He says, just let's learn 10 of these. Bikers will love it. And he was right.
What songs were you playing?
Oh, I don't remember. Jumpin' Jack Flash and Bitch and Sympathy for the Devil, those songs like that.
Yeah.
And then later on, we realized ZZ Top always had that that just chunking bass eighth note line in a lot of their songs. And that just really gets them in a bar.
Absolutely. Did you have aspirations at that point when you were early on in your career of like getting in the van and getting a record deal and going out and touring the country and the world and all that?
Maybe yes, but not in a strong way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just didn't think that was possible. I might have even dissed it a little bit, thinking, that's silly.
Yeah.
Even though I'd have loved it. Maybe I was just, I was probably into it just for the local popularity and the strokes that musicians often get.
Sure.
And that was enough. I remember saying to myself, and what we say to ourselves isn't necessarily reality, it's just what we say to ourselves. But I remember saying to myself that, I might make it as a somebody that toured around, just like you were saying, but I never thought big time was any. I didn't see the songwriting talent, not that I had it myself or had any way of judging it. Jambalaya did write a few of its own songs and do them. In fact, I wrote one of the ones that actually became, remember the KGB was it the Homegrown album?
Right.
They played that record on the radio over and over and over and over, promoting the album. And I thought, we must have won. And it's like the album came out and we weren't on it. But it was a good song, you know.
Do you remember the title?
I think it was called the Ocean Beach Boogie or Ocean Beach Rag or Ocean Beach something. But it was a riff that Corky did on the guitar. And I remember Bebop Hooray, Friday's finally here. Go down to market and buy me some beer. No books, no job till the week rolls around. I just sit on my house and watch the sun go down.
Maybe you should grab your guitar and play a little bit of it.
I don't know if I can do that.
Well, you'll play. I'll have you play on something.
Yeah, but
so you were doing you were like, there was a place called the Upper Cellar back in those days.
Yeah.
There were a lot of scenes. Like, I didn't get here till 1980 in San Diego from the East Coast, but there was a lot of places in the decade before that that were before my time, and the Upper Cellar was one of those.
Yeah.
So
that was one of the cool things that happened early on in San Diego. And I would say for people that grew up in San Diego, they're my age or even a little bit older, there was that's where I just saw folk music. And my parents would go there, they would take me there. It was right on El Cajon Boulevard. I want to guess it's the 5400 block of El Cajon Boulevard.
I have 65, 57 here as far as
55 or 65?
65.
Okay, well that's about right. You know, it and they had the cellar thing, and like a lot of houses in the Midwest where they have tornadoes, they have a cellar door, and it's at a angle. They had made it like that going down to the street, even though it wasn't a cellar, it was on ground level.
Wow.
But they made it look like a cellar because they had like pipes and stuff in the ceiling. And they're one of the notable features as far as what it looked like, and seeing it as a little kid, and I was going, whoa, man. Because there's this picture, it's probably about this big and about 3 feet tall, and it was this beatnik-looking guy wearing a beret, shades, goatee, and the what was written on the poster said, and it was, I think it looked like a handmade thing, it said, "Big Brother is watching." And as a 10 or 11-year-old, I didn't really understand if that was what that was. Looking back, I don't know if that was something political or if that was something, you know, just who knows what it was.
Right.
Because I don't remember what the...
You didn't get the Orwellian reference to 1984
at that time.
Yeah. So there was there were like hootenannies going on there, and you know, people pass the hat and do that sort of thing. Like,
I don't remember that as much, but I do remember hootenannies in Seattle when I was about a year or so older, like 11 or so. There was a place on Yesler Street, right downtown, in the downtown, like just a couple of blocks from the wharf. And the name of the place was 92 Yesler, which was the address. And they had a hootenanny, and I performed. I don't know if it was the first time I played in public, but it was definitely one of the first places. And I remember I did a Josh White tune called "Woman Sure is a Curious Critter," and I also did a tune which I found later was a Bessie Smith song called "Charlie Play That Trombone," or "Trombone Charlie." Is what they call it. And at the end of the thing, he imitates a trombone, and he's going, he's going like that. And so here's this little 10, 11-year-old kid up on stage going, and the audience was all over it, you know. And the two guys that came on stage after me said, our mothers warned us, don't ever go on after animal acts or children.
So you were already in front of audiences when you were 12?
Yeah. Not on a regular basis, but yeah, I had done it.
Yeah? Well,
I think the first was 3rd grade class. I played Swanee River on the ukulele.
Nice.
And I botched the first chord, and I went, oops, and the whole class went, ah! And then I did it again, and just like went through it, and it did a thunderous applause of 30, 3rd graders. I think something stuck them.
Nice. Yeah, I know the feeling. There's something really affirming to one's sense of self when you get that affirmation from a crowd, when you feel like you're expressing yourself in a true manner, an authentic manner, and then the world at large says, yeah, good job. And it makes you want to do more of that. Put yourself out there, out on the line. They say, like, other musicians say, if you make a mistake, do it a second and a third time. So it sounds like you meant it.
Yeah.
You know.
Or kick your amp.
Or kick your amp. Exactly. So when you were first getting into the blues and folk music, I mean, did you go back and study the history of it and go back, like, learn about Robert Johnson and some of those guys?
I didn't find out about Robert Johnson until much later. I mean, when I first heard Josh White, that was probably in the early, that was 1963, I think.
Yeah.
And my parents got a bunch of records. You remember the old record players? We could stack 3 records up, and like one would drop down and it would play, and then the next one would drop down.
Sure.
So we noodling around in the garage doing something and building something, and I would hear these records over and over again. And when that final record went down, the needle would go back and play that record again. And after hearing it about 4 or 5 times, it's like, God, somebody turn that thing over the other way. So I heard, by the time I was good enough on the guitar to even get close to playing that stuff, not that it was really hard, but I learned it very quickly because I'd heard it so many times before. That was like 63. So it was probably about 10 years later that I heard about Robert Johnson. That was because Corky, the guitar player in Jambalaya, said something about Robert Johnson, and they said, yeah, this guy was killed when he was like young, and there are only 2 pictures of him that exist.
Exactly.
And I think the only reason they have that is that they found his sister or some relative in Washington, D.C. And so hearing about him the first time was also shrouded in this mythology of like, whoa, all the other stuff about the selling a soul to the devil.
That's right, going down to the crossroads.
And how he, all of that stuff. So that really fed the imagination,
right,
as like kind of an American legend.
Well, Robert Johnson's definitely an enigma, and it's definitely a myth. The idea that he wasn't that great, and then he went away, and then he came back and blew everybody away with how proficient he'd become during his absence.
Yeah.
And like the idea of going down to the crossroads and making a deal of selling your soul to the devil is a romantic one.
Yeah.
But there's so many mythologies within the blues idiom. In fact, it's just one story after another of, Frankie and Johnny and, all these different myths and these stories, which is how we pass down these stories and ideas in the first place, through these folk songs, through these narratives, like the child ballads and the death ballads, the murder ballads, all this stuff we've had for hundreds of years now. And it's amazing how it continues to still influence the culture. I mean, then you had bands like, with the British invasion, when you had the Stones and Cream, and later like bands like Foghat, who would be doing Robert Johnson songs and rocking them up. Like one more way of bringing the music back to America from the British Isles.
And those guys were ahead of Americans as far as recognizing that music.
Absolutely. Just like the Beatles, and bringing, Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino and the Everly Brothers to young white American consciousness. They didn't realize, roll over Beethoven, sounds like a Beatles song. No, this is where the Beatles got their biggest influence, was through Chuck Berry. And that's a huge part of American music as well. He's kind of a blues man, but then he's got that swing thing going on, which you've got a lot of in your music. You've got a lot of like kind of jump, jive, and swing stuff that you do as well, in addition to the folk, the blues, and the rock stuff. So I've seen you in so many different contexts. I mean, right now you're doing a thing with Robin Henkel with horns, where you've got a rhythm section, and you've got some incredible horn players playing with you. And you've got the legendary Gunnar Biggs playing bass with you at the moment, which is really something to see. So you've been writing all your own charts for those bands, right?
Yeah.
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 Did you do much history? Did you do much theory or studying how voicings work and stuff?
It all kind of came gradually over a long period of time. I'd say the original part of it was that when I was, once again, a little kid, I used to listen to Antonio Carlos Jobim, the Brazilian composer, who had not just written The Girl from Ipanema, but like a whole bunches of beautiful.
He pretty much invented bossa nova.
Well, He was definitely a strong influence. Yeah. And the people that were at the beginning of Bossa Nova were playing his songs. Anyway, so that got me into chord changes. And then before I knew anything about chord changes, I really wanted to learn one-note samba, which is a Jobim tune. And my guitar teacher at the time, which I think was either Ozzy's or Thurl's music on Marina Boulevard. I don't remember which might have been one of those.
Yeah.
And he said, you need to take lessons from this guy named Chris Quebec. And he was the guitar player in more of a pop band, but he knew a lot more about theory. So he showed me a couple of those songs. I was really lazy because I didn't know how to read music. I just wanted to play it and get the immediate reward. And I only got so far with it. Skipping really far ahead, I became, when Jambalaya broke up, or when I left Jambalaya, or actually they left me, they dumped me. Let's get it right, you know. Anyway, I moved to Del Mar, and Mark Lessman, saxophone player, became a great friend. And he was the one that sat down with the real book and held my hand while I was like totally butchering the changes and like stayed with me till I could get some of that stuff right. And there was a piano player named Bert Seeger that I learned a lot of standards from. And so all of that stuff was learned over a period of time. At one point, I had mentioned to Mark Lessman that I would really like to study arranging, you know, and 6 months, a year later, Mark came and said, hey, there's one of the top arrangers, a guy that teaches at Berklee College of Music in Boston, is coming out to San Diego and starting a school. So I signed up for it, and his name was Hal Crook. And he has probably been the strongest, biggest influence and taught me the most amount of stuff in the shortest period of time, and just made it really understandable in a simple way. I mean, you had to do the work, but when I teach my students now, a lot of times it's him speaking through me, even if we're doing something much more simple. And specifically, that would be learn your damn major scale. I don't care if you know the names of the notes. You need to be able to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You need to hear every one of those sounds. It's not about perfect pitch. It's just about memorizing that sound. You could do it in any key and start thinking about your chords and everything you play in that context. Also at that time, I got a really short period of time to sit with Howard Roberts. It wasn't a private lesson. Well, neither were the lessons with Hal. But Howard Roberts, who was a jazz guitar player of the time in the 70s, probably played on a lot of the TV and movie themes back in the day, kind of a musician's musician, but he had records out under his own name. I was a big fan of him. And he was what you would call a jazz guitar player, like Barney Kessel or one of those guys like that. And he did a music seminar, a 2-day music seminar at one of the probably Town and Country Hotel in Mission Valley. And that was really the beginning before GIT, Guitar Institute of Technology. Before that got started, I think that was one of the original meetings where he taught some classes. And I remember it was $75 to sit with him for 2 days. And I was so intrigued by it that I paid for the rock guitar player, Corky, in our band to go with me. And also Jaime Valle was in that class, I'm pretty sure. And a couple of the other guitar notables from San Diego. I don't remember their names anymore.
What was your takeaway after those 2 days of sitting at the feet of a master?
The biggest thing was that same thing I said before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But now, instead of those being individual notes, each one was a chord. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, etc. That became what we just call major key harmony. And so when you hear a song and you hear C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7, you go, oh, well, let's sit 1, 6, 2, 5. And you think of it as a thing, and there are tricks and different ways to play over that. And I think contrasting that to rock musicians, they kind of learn everything by ear and maybe have a different look at theory because they can see patterns on their neck of the guitar and get around and move around that way. Whereas this is a theory that would work on any and all instruments. So that really projected me. That was a big takeaway. In fact, I remember one of the things we did was take that scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and like go 1, skip to 3, fall back to the 2, now go to the 4, go to the 3, go to the 5. And the first time we were writing a song with the Ron Bolton group, I went, ba da 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 da. They both turned their heads and went, whoa, what is that? Well, piano, it's just like that's all.
That sounds like a monk scale right there. What you just saying is
but it's
something that monk would do.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I had music theory in high school, and my teacher, Don Carnahan, he was so stressful about ear training and learning the relativity of one note to another, learning what the one note is in a particular chord, and learning everything in its relative major and minor throughout that chord. And once you've got enough ear training going, then you can play without the sheets in front of you once your ear is trained well enough and you see how it relates to the instrument that you're playing on. So that's really great. I mean, I can tell you've had a lot of training for somebody who maybe came up through the ranks informally, as it were.
Yeah, I didn't read music. In fact, I never really practiced actual reading. I'm better at writing the parts down, and that's how I arrange the horns, than I am actually reading it back. But that would just mean practicing. A lot of people that are good readers today grew up practicing piano or saxophone, which are traditionally taught. They're not necessarily taught by ear as much, especially if they take classical or jazz.
Now, before Jambalaya, you were in a band called the Highlights, weren't you?
Yes.
And now, what kind of music were the Highlights playing?
The Highlights were playing the soul music of the mid to late 60s. James Brown, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, the Supremes, Temptations, all of those, Sam and Dave.
Did you have any horns in the band?
Yes, we did. In fact, that ties back to the arranging thing, because that was a big influence on me later on. It was guitar, bass, or actually 2 guitars, bass, drums. I was on bass, and I'm pretty sure it was an alto sax and a trumpet. And we had an arranger. At 17 years old, I was the oldest person in the band. The drummer was 13.
Wow.
So it was a little kids band.
Yeah.
And the parents would take us to the local military bases, and we could play at the Enlisted Men's Club, Naval Hospital, Miramar, Naval Training Center, various places. But getting back to the arranging thing, the arranger arranged for larger bands. So it was totally within his skill set to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to write a 3-part harmony, but the trumpet's going to be on the top, the guitar's going to be in the middle, and the alto sax is going to be on the bottom. So when you heard it, it sounded like 3 horns, because the guitar was kind of camouflaged in between those other 2, and it really sounded good.
Well, there's a lot of horn bands from particularly the late 60s, like Blood, Sweat, and Tears Chicago, the Ides of March, that would be doing those sort of exact same kind of voicings. Like you hear Terry Kath fitting in between the horns on some of those lines, doing exactly the same thing you're talking about from an arrangement standpoint.
Yeah, and from an arrangement standpoint, you wouldn't have to do that, but that was using what he had to work with. And that's what I think what a good arranger would do, is look at what's in the band and like, okay, I think, I'm going to do it this way.
So you were playing bass in the first couple of bands between the Highlights and Jambalaya, and then you were in a couple of other bands like the Ron Bolton group. Were you still playing?
Still playing bass.
Still playing bass. And somewhere by 1979, I don't know if it was the first release that you had out in the public eye, but you pressed up on vinyl an album called "Let's Get Squished."
That's correct.
And you billed yourself as Robert Henkel.
Yeah. That was the first time I had copyrighted anything, and I just thought it was necessary to use my real legal name. I didn't realize there was a part on the copyright form that said you could copyright anonymously or with a pseudonym. In which case, I would have put Robin Henkel.
Oh, so that's why you use Robert for that one.
There was no special attachment to Robert because everybody called me Robin back then anyway.
What was it like going into the studio the first time and doing your first album?
It was really, It was really great.
Yeah.
It was really great. I was Ron Bolton and George Costa and myself were all living in a house right on Del Mar Terrace, right across the street from the lagoon. Paradise.
Yeah.
And we were playing top 40 music at Halligan's for Fish and at the Triton on Saturdays and Fridays. Sometimes there'd be a line going out the door. I mean, we're just copying songs off the radio, but we had a good formula that made us popular. And the demographic at that time was a lot of people in that age group were partying. So that was a good time to be there, so to speak. But so I was making good money. I figured, hey, it's just a tax write-off to produce a record. And it's the same as like going to, it would be the same as paying for a quarter at a college. Roughly. So, which would at the time would have been about $3,500, you know,
Right.
or $4,000. And Peter Sprague lived next door, the jazz guitar player. And I took some lessons from him for a while. And they had their own record. And I thought, only the Beatles and the Rolling Stones have records. Like, how did you make a record? He says, well, you just call a place that presses records and go in the studio and record it, and then that's it. So I got on the phone and had the phone company send me a Los Angeles phone book because there's no place that pressed records in San Diego. And in LA, there were several of them. So I called up one. It was called Award Record. And the studio was in Serrano Valley, so it was right down the street. Terry Williams, who had gotten out of being a doctor of biology, he just quit that and got out of that business completely and tried to make a go as a recording engineer. And he built a studio called Blue Light Recording Studio. And, so amongst the people that I knew at that time, actually, I left the Ron Bolton group and went with a band called Breeze. And the drummer in that band was really solid. So solid that he was like a mentor in my ability to rhythmically lock into a groove.
Who was the drummer for Breeze?
His name was Jack Flannery.
Okay.
And that was, so I had, as far as a talent pool to draw on, there was Jack Flannery, plus about 3 other drummers that I had played with, including the drummer for Ron Bolton, and Ron Bolton played on their record. So I had a large pool of musicians, as well as a couple of jazz musicians. I had played a jazz gig. Was playing string bass, and with a jazz piano player named Britt Seeger, and he played on a couple of tunes. And so I'm not even sure where I was going. I was just said, let's go in the studio and record. Let's go in the studio and record. Go in the studio and record. And like 6 months or a year later, you got enough music for an album. And there was no financial push. There was no wild. I mean, I'm sure that I had some expectations of grandeur.
Yeah.
I figured because, we were in a popular band. And the program, sometimes the people that are the big wigs at different companies, radio stations, stuff, come into the bars where you're playing and you get to know them. And I thought, well, I knew the program director at KGB and someplace else. And I thought, well, sure, they'll play my record. And the hard, cold truth was explained to me.
Yeah.
Hey, we buy a list of songs to play, and we play those songs.
Certainly by 1979 and 1980, the landscape on radio had
automated.
Totally changed the way it was maybe even 5 years earlier. And there's so many great examples. In fact, there's a fantastic new documentary about the station WHFS in Washington, D.C. That was one of the very first free-form underground stations.
Okay.
Started back around 69, 70, and it went up through those changes of the middle, late 70s, which is sort of reflected in the movie FM in a satirical kind of manner of how corporations took over the media in so many ways. And radio is no different.
Yeah.
And it's like, does radio even really exist the way that we grew up with it? I don't think it does. Yeah. Terrestrial radio, at least, it's become a totally different animal. It's gone back to sort of like a kind of a word of mouth thing. But I can't imagine that at the time when you were making a record that you weren't looking for, some kind of, like you say, sort of like visions of grandeur or glory or some kind of, acceptance on a bigger level that would take you somewhere beyond just playing in a bar in Del Mar.
Mostly just the ego of driving down the boardwalk of Pacific Beach and hearing my song come over the radio in somebody else's car.
Right.
I mean, that's what I thought might happen.
Yeah.
You know, and if I thought anything beyond that, I don't really know. I don't think I thought of anything nationally, but at that time, that was what I thought was kind of the beginning of the do-it-yourself movement, the self-produced artist. And there was a music magazine called, I think it was called The Music Connection. She ran across it.
Sure.
And they really played to the audience of independent artists and gave, you know, these are the people you contact, these are the companies you can deal with, these are the radio stations that will still play your stuff. And that was huge because I could see that there was a support system there. And that meant a lot to me.
Well, there was like a corporate mag like CMJ, the College Music Journal, that was sort of doing that in the 80s and 90s, where it was trying to, which eventually just became as corporate as anything else. You know, like the so-called alternative market of when college radio was becoming its own kind of aesthetic around 1980 to 85. Eventually, that just became the next other, you know, genre that the corporations pandered to, and it just got as co-opted as anything else became.
Did they really? Huh.
Yeah, I think so. Bands like REM and Game Theory, they were underground, and then they get enough, or they get enough attention, or they go to a major, and then all of a sudden they're no longer underground, and what used to be underground is no longer the case anymore. And but to keep things on the local level, I think that's really like the whole community building thing of finding your own people in your own town and playing to that. You can do the whole thing where you get in the van and you go out there and become a road warrior, but you know there's a lot of casualties. That lifestyle will kill you faster than anything. Not because of any drugs or alcohol or any of that, sort of just the pace of it, and it'll just make you old before your time. It's hard enough living life as an artist and a musician without having to add that onto the stack of responsibilities. But in San Diego, we've had such an interesting scene here, living in the shadow of LA, but also having its own kind of vibe. And I mean, you've proved it over the last 4+ decades by you've made at least 12 albums now, all on your own, documenting your songs and your covers of other classic blues and swing and folk kind of tunes. And I mean, where do you see yourself in the grand scheme of things, like between being an original artist or perhaps a revivalist like Leon Redbone or somebody in that, where they're playing outside their time. Like Leon Redbone was playing in the 70s, but he seems like he's more like he's really belongs in the 30s. I've kind of thought that about you from time to time over the years when I've seen you play. You seem like you're not a man of the here and now, like you're outside of time almost. You know,
I would say when I go in the recording studio and create new music, it's much more technical. Or when I say technical, I mean, you know, based on modern times. You know, just I'm not afraid to do crazy stuff. I guess what they would call techno. You know? Drum machines and stuff. When I do the more old-fashioned blues thing, that's more of a live thing. And the two of those things have never really merged. I've tried to merge them together, and I haven't been pleased with the results so far. As far as merging like a kind of a gritty, you know, trash candy drum sound, just, you know, synthesizer, thumping bass. I've looked at what I think are a lot of my strong points, and I've said, what music where I could like push all of those forward? And I've gone through that thought process numerous times, and just, I don't know, it just hasn't landed on anything. And I'm keep going. You know, that means it's almost like the story of an artist that builds and builds and builds, and none of it really gets released or noticed. If I put that stuff up on TikTok, it's like, there's a deaf ear that goes out to it. If I play some slide guitar on TikTok, they're like all over it, you know?
Well, it's funny you mentioned TikTok, because I believe that these days, are you not like on TikTok almost every day for an hour?
I was for 4 years, and about 2 months ago, I kind of
Oh.
I didn't intentionally kill it, but there's so many things going on that I had to just drop it.
Okay.
But when I do a live show, I still do a live stream on that show.
Okay.
Like Sunday, I played at the Casino Inn out in Alpine, and I bring I do everything on the cell phone. And, people come in from the Netherlands and Spain, and I've got fans in England and what do you call it, Northern Ireland, as well as all over the United States. And sometimes I don't even look at the screen because I'm busy playing for people.
Sure.
So I don't have time to go, oh, hey, hola. It's like but they sign in, and I can't communicate with them. If I do it at my house,
sure,
I can watch the screen. So I still have it going, but, the thing that I think attracts the most people, at least in that venue, is when I do a lesson on how to play slide guitar, 100,000 views.
Oh, really?
Or likes. I'm not sure, probably likes. And if I do something that I just play something and I think is really nice, 3,000. It's like not, they're every once in a while play. When I started on TikTok, I played a couple of things that, I don't know if I would use the expression go viral, but a lot of people, see, when people like it, they'll share it. And then those people share it.
Sure.
And so it has a kind of a multiplying effect of growing. But I've posted some of that, that techno, funky music that I do. It doesn't really, it's almost like they've heard all that stuff. They don't care.
Yeah.
When I do Delta blues guitar and have a little bit of a scratchy sound and play some slide, especially if it's edgy, when I did one of the first ones, there was a little bit more distortion or gain on the guitar than I would normally had. And the first chord I did is a dissonant chord that resolves to its resolution. And I remember one of the first comments that was in the comments said, "Man, that first chord made me want to puke." But then that was followed by numerous other ones that were like, really loved it.
People are funny. When I was over at your house recently, you had a big map of the world up on the wall with push pins of all the places where people were watching you on TikTok, and you had almost the entire globe covered with pins.
Yeah.
It was like every continent. Have you interacted with any of those folks from, say, like Russia or?
Well, a lot of times when I get someone from Russia, I can't tell if it's from Eastern Europe or Russia or what. I don't know if Russia is blocked from TikTok or if there was a time earlier when they could go on it. I have to start memorizing my flags because sometimes in the comment, they'll put the flag of that country in their comment.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. Sometimes, just where the red, white, and blue is the red, white, and blue going this way, or is it going that way, or is that guy French, or is he? But when I see that was it called Cyrillic alphabet, the Russian alphabet rather than the alphabet we use.
Yeah.
I recognize certain words.
Okay.
And I tried to learn a couple of words in Russian just so I could say hello and thank you.
Yeah. It's always polite to make a stab when you're in somebody else's country.
I'm very much about if there's anything I can do to bring people together in this world, I would like to do that. If I have a choice, I'm definitely going to do that.
Well, music's the great unifier, and it's the language that everyone speaks, no matter what country they're in. Do you mind for a minute if you were going to teach somebody, give them a 1-minute lesson on slide guitar? Do you mind playing a little bit of slide and kind of give the folks out in
Sure will.
out in our audience a taste of what you're talking about?
Yeah. One thing about the comments that I get from in the Cyrillic language, or the alphabet, which it could be Russian, but it could be one of the other Eastern Bloc countries, but they'll say something like, "Man, hearing that makes me want to go into a bar and start a fight." Because they have this picture of the Wild West. And as Americans, we think blues is this and country is this music.
Sure.
But I think they all have it grouped kind of together.
Well, at the end of the day, I'd say that a lot of that music has kind of come together in its own kind of unique melting pot where country music, you know, Appalachian folk music, swing, Delta, Chicago blues, New Orleans, all that stuff comes together in 2025 to be American music.
Well, if I'm with a student and from broadcasting on TikTok, a lesson maybe come out a little different. But a lot of times on TikTok, I'm going to play something to get their attention. So, you know, a couple of things I was doing here, I'm going to share with you here. First thing, if you're playing a blues, I can't remember if this is in D tuning or E tuning, but they're both really the same thing. It sounds like E, B, E, G sharp, B, and E. I usually use D because it's lower and gravelly, but I think I retuned because something I was playing on. But the first thing you want to notice in this tuning is it's super easy to play that rhythm like that. And the reason you want to get good at things that are super easy is because all the fancy stuff is not going to help you if you can't keep the beat. And another thing that's going to project your music forward is just singing something. So if you're going to sing, you want what you're playing on the guitar to be really easy. I'm gonna move to the outskirts of town. We don't need nobody always hanging around. I know people scoff at me when I say I'm not really playing anything that's very difficult. It's just knowing what to do and having enough good time to support it. I mean, if you're so here's where a lot of people are going to go, oh, I don't have the time to do that. And I'd say if you make this a lifetime study, every time you hear a piece of music, 1, 2, 3, 4, and don't just count it in a relaxed way. Dig into it like 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Try to press yourself into that beat. And if you start to tap your foot and play one of the songs that you already play, if you totally fall on your face, don't give up. Just stay with it. Everything I do is really based on this timing thing. So I'm not counting when I'm playing, but I can feel the count. And the thing is, you should count for a couple of years, so it just becomes so deeply subliminal that you can just whack the stuff off. In fact, I was hearing my friend Ronnie Lane, who passed recently, used to tell me about this one guitar player that he loved. Can't remember his name. And years later, I met this guy, and when he walked up on stage, he went like this. And his groove was so intense. So that's what you want to work for. Make your freaking groove intense. But once that's established, people are going to want the glitzy stuff. Like, it's easy. You go to the 12th fret. That's the middle of the string when you think about it. And you can... that classic Elmore James lick you hear. That everybody does. You can do this at any fret. There's your 5 chord. One thing about strumming across, you can't keep the rhythm going when you're holding that. So I try to mix it up enough so that rhythm never dies. When I told you about that drummer, Jack Flannery in Breeze, once you start it, you don't let go of it. You got to keep that going. About everything I do, the phrases, the licks are in that groove in such a way that on a live gig, I'm stomping quarter notes on my microphone stand. Boom, 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 boom. So even if I take a second off, that boom, 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 it's still there,
Right.
and I'm feeling it. If you stop, you don't like. No, you stop, and this is pulsing inside your body and your mind. So some of the easy slide licks that I do, if you're in this tuning, on the third fret of the second and third string, this is where you get that sound. Mm-hmm. The most cliched sound that you're going to hear in this or in other tunings is that stuff. And I rarely do that. One of the things you hear guitar players from Robert Johnson to Jimi Hendrix, they'll go to the 5th fret of the 2nd string, which is the same note as the open string, and they're usually going to be a teensy bit out of tune. So it gives you a little nice tension there. And I think another thing that helps slide playing is to, on the first string, play a melody like Amazing Grace. Mm-hmm. Once you have those positions, if you want to look at that in theory, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm playing the 6th, the 5th, the 3rd, and the 2nd, and the root. And when you play the 3rd, a lot of times in blues, you slide into it, or you play it intentionally out of tune and just leave it there.
Can you talk about the function of the turnaround when you're playing a riff like Sweet Home Chicago?
Yeah. The classic, as far as the Mississippi sounding lick that you'll hear most often for the turnaround, is going to go. Sounds sometimes like it's not enough, but that's what it is. Right. A standard turnaround in jazz would be ascending rather than descending. You can do both of those at the same time and have legitimate counterpoint inside of a blues. So a lot of times I would tell my bass player, if you hear me going down and you catch it in time, you go up. But it's just a thing we catch on the fly. In this tuning, it's really easy to do that here, too. And a lot of times that turnaround, the notes used in that turnaround could be used just for like the one section.
For the whole song.
Well,
as the one part.
Whenever the one is there, yeah. And sometimes I've wondered if that's where Page got the idea for, was it Dazed and Confused? He actually starts. So, I mean, he could have come up with that originally on his own.
He could have, but he actually got it from a guy named Jake Holmes, who he stole it from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but that's a whole other podcast talking about the 30 or so blues songs that Jimmy Page took credit for that were actually from somebody else. But that's part of that's part of like Bob Dylan, the whole thing. Bob Dylan wrote 400 songs where he just rewrote the lyrics to existing melodies.
Right.
And then next thing you know, eventually through those exercises, you kind of come out with your own original voice eventually. But that's what the whole folk and blues thing has done. I mean, the idea, how many songs have, if you were doing plagiarism lawsuits, you know, if you listen to the R&B charts from like 51, 52, everyone's got the you know, the I'm a man, or the every one of them had that. So how do you copyright that?
Yeah, no, it's just a phrase that's in the, it's all usable stuff.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Yeah, I mentioned Peter Case in the last show, and I said to him, I go, you know, there's that part in that song you do where you stole that melody from the heart. Whoa, whoa, whoa. And he goes, oh man, that stuff's free. Like it's just there for the taking. You know, if you're going to be an original songwriter, you know, obviously there's pitfalls in copyright as far as like, you know, did Jimmy Page steal part of Stairway to Heaven from Fresh Garbage by Spirit? You know, and it's like, yeah, they share similarities, but only when you start making millions do the lawyers start coming after you.
It doesn't matter until it becomes a hit.
Exactly. But, you know, you could take a song like Willie Dixon's, you know, You Need Love and say it's Whole Lotta Love, and it's obvious they pretty much copied it note for note, you know. But that's the whole thing about the folk and the blues tradition, you know. We're not here to put our signature on it so much as to feel it in the moment. And like you're saying, technique is beautiful, but you've got to have that feel. And feel is far more important, I think, at the end of the day. It's great when you can combine the two, but feeling is the real thing when it comes to playing music. So you switched over to the resonator here, and I know John Lennon had a big collection of resonator guitars.
Really?
Yeah, he was a big fan of those. Even though you never heard or saw him play one, he had a bunch of them by the time he reached the end of his life. But what's the difference now when you're playing the resonator here to the other guitar that you were playing?
Well, the difference, one difference I can point out is, well, obviously it's being played on my lap. I'm going to come back to that. Back in the 1920s, they were trying to figure out a way to make a guitar louder. And they had all sorts of weird experiments. It probably didn't work very well. So you've seen the guitars that look like they have a hubcap on the front of them, what we commonly call a resonator guitar. Well, one of the reasons it's called a dobro is because the man that made those guitars is named John Dopiera. And it's believed that dobro is either a shortened version of Dopiera Brothers or maybe just dobro. What I found out later that in Eastern European languages, dobro means kindness or goodness or something along those lines. But before they made what's underneath that round pan is a metal speaker. Now remember, this is before electric guitars. There's a metal speaker and the string energy vibrates that speaker and it amplifies itself acoustically. Well, this was the first one they made, and it was actually when he worked at a different company called National, which he later quit because he didn't like one of the corporate heads. But anyway, this guitar is kind of famous in that it's got 3 small cones. I don't know if you can try to get a close-up or not. You really can't see, but through that screen, there's like 1, 2, 3 cones. Each one's about 4 or 5 inches in diameter. So because of that, this guitar is called a tricone.
Okay.
And then the brand name is National, so it's a National tricone. And at that time, Hawaiian music was kind of popular. And that's why this guitar has a big square neck. They called that Hawaiian neck.
So like slack key?
I think slack key is a completely different thing.
Okay.
You know, I get asked that quite often. But this is, I think, I really know the history of that to even speak to that. So I don't know. But since it's got a big fat neck like that, you can't even play it like a regular guitar. You can't put your hand around it. But they did make round neck versions of the same thing. But then instead of fretting the instrument by pressing it down, you can see that the action, meaning the distance from the string
Quite high
to the fretboard, is so high that you couldn't even press it down. So this is intended to be played with a steel. This steel is actually not steel, but it's got a weight slug inside of it. It's some kind of I think it's that cutting board material, Corem. I don't really play any Hawaiian music. My own thing.
Dynamite. Now, you were taking a resonator, weren't you? There was about 15 years ago, there was a program that I believe Brother Wayne Kramer of the MC5, he started a program called Jail Guitar Doors. And there's a local music enthusiast by the name of Rob Bird who got you involved with going into the prisons actually and playing guitar and giving some lessons and some background on the guitar to the inmates in some of the jails here in San Diego. What was that experience like for you?
That was really, really one of the just a special thing in my life. I can always look back to. Rob originally contacted me, and I don't know how it got started, but he was not going into the prison yet. But in that whole prison complex, there's a jail called the East Mesa Relocation or Reentry Facility. And that's where people that are in jail for a short period of time or they're going to get released soon, they go there. So we went there first, and of course there's a fair amount of bureaucracy involved with getting signed up. And but we went in, and it was just really special. There'd be about 15 guys, and a guard would let us in a room because they have classes. And one of the things in jail is that they want to have is classes to keep the guys busy, so they, don't fight. And if some of those classes lean towards rehabilitation, various things like that. And so we did those classes, and it was I always said, well, what do you want me to do? Was it a guitar lesson, or technically it was a workshop where they play, but I don't know what to do. I feel comfortable in my own mode when I'm up there playing for people, talking. But so we would do that, and then they'd break out these about 20 guitars from these closets that had all been donated to the program, and they all guys sit around and work away on their D chord, and as slow or as I don't know. That's one of the things they look forward to all week, to do that, because it's a high point in their week is something to do, because it can be pretty boring, I suppose.
Doing time.
But after we did that for a year or so, we were asked to go over to Donovan State Prison, which is just a mile down the street, and now more bureaucracy. You know, had to take class on how to, you know, handle ourselves and what sign documents. If anything happens to you, you're on your own stuff, you know. So, but that was very rewarding because that was a real prison. That was the step up from a jail. I remember the first time we went, it was dark. It was probably at 5 or 6 o'clock, but it was a time of year when it was kind of starting to get dark. And this whole yard was this large yard, like 75 yards across. And, you know, there's no fences and barbed wire. And you got to go to this door and go through this security and then go through this door and go through that security, show your ID about 3 times to get into place, even after you've been approved. And, so one of the final gates that we went to, there's a guard, and the guard says, "Oh, I know you. You're that blues guy." So here I am in jail or in prison, and the guard knows me. I thought that was kind of bizarre. But they said, "Go down to the recreation room is down that walkway, and it's a blue door." And we're walking down there, and we're looking, we can't find it. We look around the whole complex, and every single door is blue. So we go, well, he says, well, just go up to that tower and yell up to the tower. See, we feel really self-conscious. We're going to go into a yard and yell up to the tower. And well, that was okay. He says, it's that third one down. So I don't know, but that was just some of the experience going in for the first time. Very, very rewarding. Very rewarding.
What did you get out of it?
God, just the satisfaction or the feeling in your heart, the warmth of how much they appreciated what we were doing, and also just being there and seeing them and talking with some of them, and a lot of seeing them write their own songs. When we went over to the prison, it kind of went a little in a different way. They supplied maybe a checklist of a piece of paper with like several things that might encourage an inmate to write and be creative. Because that's the whole thing. It's like just partially, you know, nobody ever, I don't know if they ever use the word therapy, but it has a therapeutic effect for them. For sure. And also it brings them closer together. Is some of them commented in the out, you know, when they fill out a survey when you leave, they said, I'm better friends with some of the guys in the yard. The people at administration, in the administration of the prison, like that stuff because it means less fights, less problems, less, so. Anyway, they give them a list of things like home, family, love, addiction, loneliness, little one-word phrases that would trigger somebody to write something.
Sounds like the classic themes of a blues song, you know?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. And so they would write, and some of them were pretty damn good. They were creative, like one guy could rap, and one guy could play like good rhythm on a folk song. So this guy's singing lyrics that were written by this guy, and he's rapping them against this guitar part, and they're all doing their thing. And then each group would play a song for the other one, and it created a lot of community.
I think you just tapped into something like we're creative animals, and if we don't, and we're social animals, and if we don't have a chance to express our creativity in positive ways, we go out stealing hubcaps or knocking over a liquor store or whatever that expression ends up becoming, where you become an outlaw and you don't fit in. I think if you don't have a healthy outlet for your creativity, that's, you know, sort of like the fire within. If it doesn't come out, it's going to burn you, and you're going to turn to ash inside if you don't get it out somehow. Now, Rob talked to me about being a part of that jail guitar doors program, and I thought about it, and I was a little too paranoid about the bureaucracy. I thought once they got me behind bars, they wouldn't let me back out again.
Yeah. Well, that's what everybody thinks the first time, you know. But,
yeah, so it sounds like it was a very worthwhile time for you.
Very rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, you got a shout out for Wayne Kramer. He after he spent a lot of time behind bars, you know, he got this inspiration to, after feeling some compassion for those who had been locked up, to try and find some way of alleviating some of their pain and transforming it into something more positive. Now, you've been playing with big bands and orchestras over the years, and I think one of the projects you've been doing lately that evolved out of Blues 90, and that's what you're doing now with your big band horn thing.
Yeah, Blues 90 was about 30 years ago. And there was one variation of Blues 90 that was a blues band, a four-piece blues band, guitar, bass, drums, harmonica. But then I was always trying to throw in some jazz, some fusion, some funk, some stuff like that. And it probably made me less popular in the blues places, but I just had to do it. And other bands were doing it too, you know? Because of that's when I was, shortly after I was learning about writing and arranging with Hal Crook, I wanted an outlet for that. And even though I can't actually sit down at a piano and play songs on a piano, I could, you know, arrange the horn section on a piano, write it down on paper, transpose it, give it to the two or three guys. And some of the early gigs were at Mandolin Wind, Bella Via in Cardiff, and we opened a show for John McLaughlin one time at the Bacchanal, and that was the early seedlings of the band that plays now. When we play Panama 66, we'll be at the Adams Street Fair for the first time ever. I think the first time recently, and that's three horns, guitar, bass, drums. So there's, on that gig it's going to be trumpet, trombone, and baritone saxophone, and guitar, bass, and drums. And some of it is funk, but it's not like people think about like chic or disco, really down danceable funk. It's more jazz fusiony funk, kind of stuff like that. And I love Duke Ellington. I love Count Basie. I haven't put in a lot of time playing in bands like that. It's just my own band, So, but going back to that original thing I was talking about, the arranger that came in and wrote for the little kids band, seeing him do what he did was like 50 years ago, and that became somewhat the impetus for this, or the original inspiration. I remember back when I was 18 years old and there was a trumpet and a saxophone in that band, I took that basic guitar like wow, 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 and wrote it out in two-part harmony, and then handed one part to the trumpet and one part to the saxophone player, and they both played it, and it was perfect. And I said, this is not hard to do. Like, anybody could do this. Don't tell. I like the style arranger, but I mean, it's something you could learn how to do.
That's kind of a thing. You've got a song with the big band you do called "Everybody's Pissed," and I think that's one of my favorite songs of yours these days.
Cool.
Yeah, it's got a kind of a rap thing to it.
Yeah,
but it's got that jazzy swing going on. And some of the voices too, like for some of the Frank Zappa stuff, like the Grand Wazoo, some of the jazzier things that was utilizing horns. I've heard some of that kind of voicing in some of your stuff with the big band, and it's really tasty from a tonal standpoint. But I have never, throughout the last 3-4 decades of seeing you perform, I've never seen you where you didn't look like you were having a great time. You're always being kind of whimsical, irreverent, never mean-spirited, and I think that's what people respond to in large part. Besides your obvious musical talent, is you put out such a fun vibe, and there could be a lot more of that in the world. I think these days.
I think it's good to have, whether they're actual mentors or not, see people that you copy that handle an audience well. And I've never thought of myself as doing that, as being holding an audience well or dealing with it. But over a period of time, I just I don't know. You could sit and worry about what to say, or you could just start talking any stuff,
right?
And that's going to go over,
right?
And the next thing you know, you're really fluid and and then guys like Billy Watson is a real clown on stage, but I mean his music is serious business,
right?
But he really works the crowd. I just remembered, in fact, he and I just spoke. Went to dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I reminded him about Labor Day gig at the Coyote in Carlsbad about 5, maybe more like 10 or more years ago. And he was saying, okay, today's Labor Day. now I get my beaches back. Now I get my roads back. Now it's
Right.
like it kind of dissing on all the tourists.
Right.
You know?
Well,
'Cause-
it's true. We are a tourist town.
and it's so, but just the way he did it was so hilarious.
Yeah.
I love it.
I feel you, and it just happened for us this last few weeks here. You see a definite shift from
Right.
maximum density, and now it's back to a little bit of breathing room here in town. So these days, when you're playing gigs, either solo or with your big band, if people wanted to hear your music beyond hearing you live,
Yeah.
where can they get your CDs?
They can. The best place I think is go to my website, but it's also on all of the or a lot of the music vendors online, whatever they are,
CD
Apple Music,
CD Baby.
CD Baby. They all have digital copies. People pretty much buy individual songs as digital download. It's usually 99 cents.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Now, you mentioned the Adams Avenue Street Fair and Music Fair that comes out every September in town. Now, you were playing like when Lou Curtis first started the folk festivals back in '74, I think, here in town. You were playing the folk festivals from the very beginning, weren't you?
Not really, no. I think I came in around the late 80s.
Okay.
And I think the first time that Lou Curtis booked me, that was back when he was booking.
Yes.
I came out with something that was kind of like a power trio, which was pushing the edge. And I think he was going, whoa, is this the guy I booked?
Yeah.
But, it's still based in my blues.
Yes.
It was a trio. It was bass player and Larry Dent on drums. And, but we just hit hard, And so I don't know if that was the first one. There are plenty of them that I did as a solo.
Right.
I remember the Beer Garden was really a classic venue that I always liked playing every single year. I loved playing the Beer Garden. That was like really great. And as time went on, they just shifted their emphasis on what bands they were hiring, and they started getting more young bands.
Sure.
And a lot of them I couldn't do because, sometimes the art walk was the same day.
Yeah.
It was usually the last Saturday, Sunday of April was when they would do the blues. What do you call it?
Well, now it's called the
Roots Fest.
Yeah, and now it's called the Unplugged Festival.
So I had to turn a lot of them down.
Yeah.
So now I've been brought back to one of the better stages. So it's a good opportunity. I'm glad it's happening.
Yeah, well, I've seen it at the Unplugged Festival many times. I played the Unplugged Festival for about 7 years in a row, and it seemed like I was always seeing you. After playing one of my sets, I'd see you at Lestat's, or a lot at Lestat's. And if you saw some of those shows, you understand why you've been so successful at winning several awards from the San Diego Music Awards for best. The category best
I think
blues.
one time it was best blues artist, and other times it was best blues album.
Well, that's got to be
so
gratifying.
Yeah, very, very rewarding.
Yeah.
Over 20 years, it's been 5. So what's that, like once every 4 years? It's pretty damn good, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm just really humbled and appreciated. I appreciate that the everyone either votes, or some of those are decided by a panel of judges. And over the years, sometimes it's been vote, sometimes I think now it's combination of vote and a panel of judges. I don't know who's on that panel, but I think some of them like me. And if you want to get back into the depths of the politics of it,
right.
Which I can't really speak to because I don't even know who the panelists are, but well, I don't know, when you win an award and there's several other people in the category that are like really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just humbled by that whole thing.
Sure.
Well,
I find the whole award ceremony thing to be very political, and it oftentimes is who you know as opposed to the merit of your abilities. But at the same time, that eventually or occasionally they do get it right, and they do recognize, the people that you particularly love, and sometimes it ends up being you.
Yeah. I mean, the first time it was after a long period of not putting out a release. That was the year 2000.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to put out a CD. And it's been 10 years since I put out anything. So everything was CDs, and I'd never put out a CD. And so I remember I went to Buzz Campbell and Johnny G, who were the guitar player and bass player at Hot Rod Lincoln, had been students of mine. And I said, okay, bring me up to speed. What am I supposed to do? And they gave me some advice, and I just went with it.
And now there's like, there's like
the red one.
There's like a dozen CDs
and
now.
That was the first one to
Highway.
Yeah, Highway was the first one to win an award. And when that, when they announce your name, and you're sitting in the audience,
sure,
and reality kind of blurs a little bit.
Sure.
And when you hear your name or you think you hear your name, you just think of how I'm going to run up on stage and they called somebody else, And it's like there's kind of a moment of anticipation along with disbelief, all of that stuff mixed up. And when they said Robin Henkel, I'm going, but then I heard my song over the big, huge speakers that they have. That's what I knew. Okay, this is for real. So that was that one right there.
You're not hallucinating.
Yeah. And so it just happened over and over several times. The most recent one I think was Best Blues Artist. I can't even remember. No, it was it's for a record that isn't even a CD. So the one that I recommend people go, where's that one, Watermelon Seed? The green one. That's the one that I recommend people get, because most people know me as a blues artist, and that's the one that's closest to that style. Because some of these other ones are dabbling in, I said that kind of techno or that other area of mixing up stuff. I've put out a few releases that dig back into the archives of things that I recorded 20 and even 30 years ago that either were never released. And I said, screw it. I'm not going to try to package this into some thing where it's all the same music.
Sure.
I'm just going to randomly these are things that I did 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and some of it's fusion, some of it's with the band, some of it's me noodling around on a computer, some of it might be an acoustic blues, and in a way, I think it's totally anti-marketing to release anything that way as far as the industry goes. But
sure,
you can see that's not my bend. My bend is more, I want to have those songs registered for copyright and out into the world, maybe on the off chance that if something would be used in film,
sure,
or any kind of usage. I'm not presenting myself as an artist other than just whatever kudos I get from you did all that stuff, that.
I think it's also important, like the conversation we're having right now, I think it's important to get things down for posterity. And I'm really a big believer, and have been for decades, that it's important to get people's oral histories down, just for the record, so that other people, when we're gone and we can't tell these stories any longer, it's nice to know that the stories are going to live on for other people to appreciate, enjoy, and get some context out of the times that they didn't live through. Like when we listen to records from the 30s and the 40s, it gives us a window into a world that's long gone. And you can use your imagination with the limited technology that they had at the time, both with film and with audio technology. I can imagine what it's like to live through the 20s and the 30s when I hear those recordings. I mean, I think maybe summarizing, I know you spent a whole lifetime making music. I mean, what has music meant for you? And do you think music has a purpose for us human beings? And what has it meant for you all these last 40, 50 years to be a traveling troubadour blues man?
I think, well, this may not sound very philosophical or anything, but it's just getting attention, it's like, I just appreciate that, and that's kind of, but it goes much beyond that. A lot of times you can do something for your own self-gratification, your own ego, and not have any recognition that it's actually good for other people as well. Like people have come to me. One of my fans on TikTok from somewhere in England, Yorkshire, in England, said, you know, I started listening to your music when my brother died, and you saved me. And you know, it's like you're playing in public, and I play in public, and we sometimes get people walk up to me just, oh, they're like raving, and you tend to go, you know, it's like, what, you know, it's like you're a little too much, dude, you know, and you don't realize that it really means a lot to some people. And it's so easy to be callous or oblivious to that it really, so now that I'm older, I don't know, I think my perception of the whole thing is a little different. I think about more, what can I do with my music to help things out? I know that jail guitar Doors thing really caused me to see how it affects other people, what it does for other people. And not just my music, but just my being with them and encouraging them to do something where a lot of these people may have had lives where they were discouraged from everything and put down, and you know, some of that may account for their situation of not being recognized, not being loved, not being cared for, not being appreciated. And so it's not just the sounds of the notes themselves, it's who you can be as a person. I think when you play an instrument or do anything well, people have a tendency to trust what you say, or they figure you're, you know, they're going to pay attention when you say something.
Sure.
And so that can really go a long way, I think, beyond the music itself.
Well, music and positive vibrations are a very universal thing, and you just tapped into it. I'm sure you have, I know I have had times in my life where a song or an artist or an album will get under your skin for a period of time, and it'll really get you through a period of time that might have been difficult for you. The loss of a relationship, a death of a family member, whatever it is, and it gets you through. And I think sometimes as artists as well, that we provide some of that same function for others who don't have those same outlets. Or you just catch them at the right moment in their life when you're saying the exact perfect thing for what they need to hear at that moment. And that's out of your control. And yeah, sometimes if people are a little intense, it can be a little bit, you know.
The way it comes back to us or to me or whoever is a lot of times so rewarding. One of the comments I got from TikTok early on was somebody in the Ukrainian army that said, "We have bullets going over our head. Your music helps us relax."
Wow.
And that just like, whoa, that hit me pretty.
That's pretty heavy.
Like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're looking for a sense of purpose, I think that's about as good a purpose as we could have to be here right now on planet Earth, is to help others through their journey. So, Robin, I want to say it's been really a pleasure to sit here with you today on Frequency 432, and I love you, man, and it's been such an honor and a privilege to get to know you.
I appreciate
all these years.
Being able to hang out with you.
Thanks for sharing your talents with our audience, and continue making a sound here in San Diego. I can't wait till the next gig to see you out there.
Stop.
All right, man. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Like a watermelon seed.